Welcome to The Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. This week, if you convert the box office to Leisureland money, this is the most successful movie of all time. This is Downsizing. Welcome to The Blast Zone.
Welcome to The Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I am Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies like Downsizing, which we'll be talking about today, sadly. But before we get into that, Ian, how are you doing this week?
Well, I had another week where everything seemed to go wrong, and I was almost laughing as the difficulties piled up on top of my head one after another. But I just had to keep some perspective that at least I'm not a political dissident who was tortured and then shrunk and shipped to America inside a flat screen TV box. Ironically, that dark observation is maybe the point of this movie, that people like that exist to make sad middle-aged white American men like myself feel better about themselves.
Oh, I'm sorry. This movie had a point? I was not aware of that. This is news to me.
Not a very sharp one. It does not prick a lot of people with its dull pencil of a point.
No, it does not. But things could be worse, I guess, is the moral of your story.
Yes.
And I agree. But how much worse? I don't know. It seems like COVID's back in a big way. I've got 5 people in my life that have it right now and are laid up at home.
Oh, wow.
Thor: Love and Thunder apparently isn't very good. I don't know what's going on, man. There's nothing to look forward to.
Sucks.
Yeah, I had tickets for Sunday and I canceled them because of the COVID thing. It doesn't seem like a movie worth risking it for. I'll catch it in a few weeks maybe if the surge dies down or when it inevitably comes to streaming.
Just hope it's entertaining enough to keep us going that one rainy night when we turn it on. I don't know what I'm saying.
Yeah, you're off on a tangent right now.
I'm feeling kind of sideways today. What is it? Is it Alexander Payne got me sideways?
We're not drinking any fucking Merlot. Anyway, Ian, did you happen to watch anything this week that you want to talk about besides Downsizing? Because we have to talk about it. It's in our contract. We don't have a choice.
I did. I watched something with a lot of energy, a lot of emotion, a lot of excitement, just to try to get this movie out of my craw. I watched RRR. Hard to say.
Oh, yeah.
Hold on. Let me ask my dog to remind me. Hey, Rover, what movie did I watch this week? RRR. It's
weird that your dog was closer to the microphone than you were. Where did he come from?
It stands for, in the English translation, Rise, Roar, Revolt, which is almost as hard to say as just RRR.
Some rural juror shit right there.
It is some rural juror shit, but it's a good movie. It's a brand new 2022 Telugu language movie, reportedly the most expensive, highest budget Indian film ever made. It's released in Netflix, but in Hindi. So disappointment to me. I love watching foreign films in their native language. This one's actually dubbed because you can't watch the original Telugu.
But it's dubbed into another language that you don't speak, so you still need the subtitles.
So you still need the subtitles, but you don't quite get the experience. You know that they put a lot of work into translating the songs and everything. So it's not like it's a low quality dub, but I miss, especially movies with a bunch of comedy in them. I'd love to hear the original rhythms of punchlines and stuff in languages that I don't understand.
Totally. It does not translate over to a dub as well.
You always lose something. But still, really good movie. Totally recommend it. It's based on the life of these 2 real-life Indian revolutionaries who fought against the British rule, but it brings them together in this highly fictionalized way where it's this wild superhero bromance action musical epic thing. We a lot of times rag on movies for trying to be too many things at once because it usually doesn't work. This movie is everything at once, and it's super fun. It's super exciting. It's thrilling. It's emotional. It's funny. The action is a big selling point of it. You realize as you watch an action movie like this and you see stock situations, just small moments of action, a hero who is outnumbered or has to face this or that kind of challenge, and they're all elevated because there's such creative solutions to the way the heroes fight and just the way they depict the action in it that I don't see those things in Hollywood action movies, which seems to be a slave to a small set of cliches. And so this is just super fun for that, but it's super fun for everything. The music and dancing is good. The emotional story is good. Total recommend for me.
It's definitely on my short list, and that's why I did a little bit of a double take when you said that it was based on a true story, because I've seen some clips from it. I was like, wait a second. Are you pulling a fast one on me, Ian? But then you went into the highly fictionalized spiel, and I was like, okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
To not have the ring of authenticity to it. But it looks like a great time, and I'm very excited to check it out. I went in the complete opposite direction you did. I know I talked to you a little bit about this movie off mic, and you are going to finish it because I know you started it. But one of my favorite actors, two of my favorite actors, I guess, are involved in this project. I've been on a big Ethan Hawke kick recently with The Black Phone and Moon Knight. I feel like there was a lot of career retrospectives coming out about him, people grappling with his legacy as an actor. So I've been seeking out movies of his that I haven't seen, or ones that I saw a long time ago and have forgotten. And I came across a 2019, I believe, film called Adopt a Highway, which was directed by Logan Marshall Green of the fantastic show Quarry, which I am always singing the praises of on this podcast and just in everyday life.
Yeah.
Yes, it was 2019. Sorry about that delay. It's a very small story. Ethan Hawke plays a guy getting out of jail for his third strike for marijuana, which is a real thing that happens in this country. You can go away for decades for marijuana if it's your third strike. The movie's a little heavy-handed, getting its views on the war on drugs out. It's not as deft as some other popular culture that has dealt with the kind of disparity between the offense and the punishment in the past. It's clearly the work of a first-time filmmaker, I'd say. It's not directed with a ton of flair, but it's got a really good performance from Ethan Hawke at the center of it. It's basically his movie. He's in every shot, I'm fairly certain. Playing a kick dog for the entire time. He cringes when people talk to him or move towards him or look at him. And spoiler alert, he finds a baby in a dumpster. And that's all I'm going to say. A live baby, to be clear. Not a dead baby. That'd be a much darker movie. That's all I'm going to say about it. It's a quick, breezy hour and 20 minutes. I shouldn't say breezy because I'm pretty sure I cried 5 times watching this movie.
Ooh, okay.
It's a little maudlin, a little melodramatic, but clearly in ways that work because it did its job on me.
Yeah, made you feel the feelings. That's a good sign.
Yeah, it's got a good supporting cast too. Clearly made for next to no money, but Betty Gabriel's in there from Get Out and The Handmaid's Tale, who I'm a fan of. Yeah, Ethan Hawke, obviously. It's just a good little movie if you're looking for a break from the mindless action or spectacle of the MCU or movies like Top Gun Maverick or something. You just want to kick back with a quiet drama. I recommend it.
Nice. Today's movie's a little quiet, but we're probably not going to recommend it.
Probably not. Ian, talk to me about Downsizing a little bit. Did you remember when it came out? Did you remember the marketing for it? Did you see it before the podcast? And what was your take on Alexander Payne in general? So that's a 5-part question. Give me every answer or you're going to fail.
I did not see it, but somehow I have this memory of the vibe of this movie. I understood it to be that, hey, it's not quite funny. It's not quite poignant. It's a movie that people didn't know what to make of it. And that held true when I saw it. We'll get all the way into that. Alexander Payne, he's not someone where I could say I'm a big fan. I've seen some of the big ones, Sideways. I laughed at Sideways, but I also had a deep discomfort with the tone, with the nature of the ugly characters and how I didn't really like them and thought they were despicable people, even though we were supposed to root for them. So that left a weird taste. I remember watching Nebraska and liking it, but also not like a fun movie.
Yes, his movies are kind of nasty. They're not like, there's never much of a heart at the center of them.
I guess that's
true. He strikes me as a very pessimistic person. I know The Descendants was a big hit for him. I don't know if you caught that, the George Clooney.
I did not.
Co-written by Jim Rash, the dean from Community.
Okay.
And then he had Election, was his like kind of breakout hit with Reese Witherspoon back in the day. And About Schmidt, which I actually have never seen with Jack Nicholson. So I can't speak to that, but I've seen the rest of them.
Yeah, Election had some spark.
Election's great, yeah.
Something to it that this movie just totally hollow in the middle by comparison.
Yeah, this movie, I remember when it was getting ready to be released, the trailer had me hooked. I was really excited about this movie. If you have not seen the trailer, it's a very upbeat, comedic-focused marketing blast they did. They had the Once in a Lifetime by the Talking Heads in the trailer. It's very bouncy. There's, I think every joke in the movie is crammed in the fucking trailer to make it seem like a comedy. And I was like, I like the concept. I like Alexander Payne. I'm going to check this out. And then I didn't get there opening weekend and the review started coming out. And I was like, oh, this movie's bad. Okay. So I waited till it came on streaming. And then me and my wife, Jamie, watched it. And we were like, this is like 3 or 4 movies and only one of them's any good. Yeah. And even the good ones just kind of okay. So yeah, this is a movie that I was perfectly happy with never watching again for the rest of my life.
Hey, but
so this podcast came along.
You put it on the schedule. I did not.
I know, but it's a perfect movie for this show because successful filmmaker, you know, on a real hot streak. He's got all the star power in this movie you could ask for. Got a great concept and it's fun to pick apart. Where did it go wrong? I don't think it's a very complicated puzzle.
No.
But it's still fun to talk about.
Yeah, we're going to try to make it fun. Let's keep the energy up. Unlike Matt Damon in this movie, we need to keep our energy up and get people excited about the words coming out of our mouths.
Fucking sleepwalking through this movie. This is also the press tour where he became like an extremely hated person. I don't know if you remember, there was a period like in the late 2010s where everybody turned on Matt Damon. It was mostly for press interviews for this movie.
I didn't remember that until you put it in the notes that he had some unfortunate sounding pushback to the Me Too movement, which is just not a good look.
At least he didn't do anything dumb in the years following that, like star in a crypto ad or reveal that his daughter convinced him to stop saying the F slur just a few short years ago. He exudes this air of everyman likability, but the more we get exposed to his inner life, the less I feel like that's true to his person. I think everyone got it wrong in the 90s when they were like, well, Affleck's the douchebag of the two and Damon's the more grounded, sensitive one. No, I think it was backwards. I'll hang out with Affleck any day.
Yeah, now everybody sympathizes with Affleck standing in the doorway smoking a cigarette or whatever that meme is.
Or holding a tray of just collapsing Dunkin' Donuts iced coffee. He's like, we've all been there. I'll go hang out with Ben Affleck and his fucking weird snails from that movie. I don't care. But Damon, I don't know. He doesn't seem like such a fun time.
He's a little weirder than we thought.
A little weirder, a little darker than we thought. But do you want me to get into the making of this movie? It kind of had a winding road.
Yeah, let's hear how this thing happened.
You may find yourself in a bad movie. Okay, let's see. Alexander Payne is that rare director who makes bittersweet dramedies for adults that somehow make money most of the time. Making his debut, along with his writing partner Jim Taylor, with low-budget critical darlings Citizen Ruth and Election, his next film would be the Jack Nicholson star project about Schmidt. He would go on to do irreversible damage to the Merlot industry with the Paul Giamatti Yells About Wine hit Sideways, which made a bunch of money and got several Oscar nominations, winning for Best Adapted Screenplay. The good times would keep rolling with his next movie, the George Clooney starring The Descendants. I hate saying the blank starring the movie. That's fucking annoying. Never mind. Which again made a bunch of money and won the Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay. His next movie, the somber black and white drama Nebraska, would be his first that he wasn't directly involved in the writing process for, and would again be a critical success, though a slightly lesser financial hit than his previous few movies. Upon completion of that film, Payne and Taylor pulled the script for Downsizing out of a drawer.
A teeny tiny little drawer.
They had reportedly spent 2.5 years on the script between 2004 and 2011, and intended for it to be the follow-up to Sideways, but as other projects got bumped up, Downsizing was put on the back burner.
A teeny tiny little back burner.
With pre-production now in full swing, Payne went about recasting the movie as the stars who had originally been cast, including Paul Giamatti in the role of Paul Safranek, Reese Witherspoon in the role of Audrey Safranek, and Sacha Baron Cohen in the role of Dusan Markovich, had all dropped out of the film. Matt Damon was brought in to play Paul, Kristen Wiig for Audrey, and Christoph Waltz as Dusan. With a substantial budget of about $75 million, by far the biggest of Payne's career, the movie would be a risky play as it balances drama, comedy, science fiction, and apocalyptic elements.
Plus a healthy dose of occupational therapy.
Filming began in Ontario in April 2016, with additional filming taking place in Omaha, Los Angeles, and Norway. The movie would premiere at the Venice Film Festival in 2017, and later screened at TIFF the same year, but the response from these screenings was icier than the filmmakers and studio hoped for, with much praise being reserved for Hong Chau's performance in the movie as Vietnamese dissident Ngoc Lan, but the other aspects of the movie being less warmly received. It would make its theatrical debut on December 22nd, 2017, and it was pretty clear the movie was in trouble. It opened in 7th place, which is $4.9 million, as The Last Jedi was only a week old and took 1st place, and Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, Pitch Perfect 3, and The Greatest Showman all debuted the same week and performed better.
Bigger isn't always better, but yeah, in this case it totally is.
The C Cinema score was an indication of negative word of mouth, as the marketing for the movie suggested a much more lighthearted film that didn't, completely abandon the idea of downsizing halfway through. Critics gave it mediocre reviews, as it currently has a 47% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it would limp out of theaters with a worldwide gross of only $55 million.
I guess sometimes a little doesn't go a long way.
To date, this is Payne's last movie, though he did manage to reunite with Paul Giamatti for his upcoming film, The Holdovers, which will probably release late 2022 or early 2023.
I think you made a great point at the beginning of this. His bittersweet dramedies somehow make money. This is not necessarily an original observation, but the question is not why this one tanked, but why he was so successful in the past. Not because the other films were bad. This may be his worst film, but they're just, I don't know, they're not popcorn movies.
It definitely is. No, they're not. And there's been weird marketing about most of his movies, I think. When I think back to the Sideways marketing and the Descendants marketing, those were both made to seem a lot more lighthearted than they ended up being. So it's not like this was the first time he pulled the rug out from under us a little bit. I guess those were just better movies. They had good work. Like, they both had legs in theaters. None of them opened huge, but they didn't drop off a cliff the next week like this one did. I think just those had positive word of mouth. Critics telling you this is the movie of the year or one of the movies of the year everywhere. And that will entice a certain type of person to go out to the theater and see it. But when everyone's telling you this movie sucks and it's misleading in its marketing, I could see people being wary of it.
It didn't give you what you thought you might get, and it didn't give you something really juicy and interesting instead. Like, it's okay to pull the rug as long as you give something that people still go, wow, I didn't see that coming. That was wild. This movie's not wild. It's barely interesting.
The opposite of wild. It's sleepy. To disagree with your theory there a little bit, I think critics will give you a lot of leeway in your marketing versus the final product being different. As long as it's good, they don't seem to care. I think audiences are a little more likely to hold a grudge. Just because you gave them a good movie, if it wasn't the movie you told them they were getting, you'll still see a lot of people get mad about it.
That makes sense. If you're doing the bait and switch, you can't just switch with anything. If you give them something something that's equivalent, you can win them back over. But that's extra degree of difficulty, and a movie's hard enough as it is.
And this movie is not up to the task, clearly.
No.
Yeah, Payne's interesting because I feel like he's not a name in the same way other directors who have had his success are. I don't think the average moviegoer really knows who he is or what he's about, even though he's had like pretty substantial success.
Yeah, I feel like for me, he probably peaked with Sideways. That movie was a phenomenon, one of those that the whole country was talking about. And at that point, he almost became a household name, but then pretty much coasting downhill from there.
He's had a weird career too. Him and Taylor did Punch Up on the Jurassic Park 3 script. They're 2 of 7 credited screenwriters on that movie, which is just super interesting. Like I would have liked to see them write it from scratch and see what they came up with.
Yeah.
But at that point, he'd only really done Election, and I don't think About Schmidt was out yet when Jurassic Park 3 was in production. So he probably needed the cash, to do somebody a favor and kind of hope they do one for you down the road.
Take a gig, yeah. Who wouldn't take that gig?
But I really want to know what their additions to the Jurassic Park 3 script are, because I just watched it and didn't give me a lot of Alexander Payne vibes.
Talking about this movie and the way it was marketed, like you said, the trailer makes it look like a comedy. Every joke in the movie is in the trailer. And even then, the parts that are in there, when you watch the trailer, you go, oh, I get it. That's the setup for a bigger joke that probably paid off right after that scene. But they didn't. Those were the very high points of comedy throughout the movie, were just these little tossed off lines that are in the trailer.
And there's also scenes in the trailer that are not in the movie, which is a pretty common phenomenon.
Sure.
That's not unique to this movie, but like funny stuff that was in the trailer that was clearly cut because they decided they wanted to go with a whole different tone. Like I vividly remember before I even rewatched the trailer ahead of this episode, if you asked me the most enduring image from the movie Downsizing, I'd be like, it's the giant bottle of vodka on the front lawn of Jason Sudeikis' house and everyone's filling up buckets. And I was like, that's the image I associate with that movie. It's not even the fucking movie.
No.
They cut it. It's just heavily featured in every trailer. I think it might have even been on a poster. I don't know. It's pretty bad.
And that's the stuff you can feel. It really feels like a conscious decision to take out the comedy of scale. This is a movie about shrinking people down, but the shrunken part stays very sedate and normal. There's one punchline in the movie with a nurse who brings in a giant saltine cracker. And even that is done in a corny way where it undercuts itself. She knows she's doing a dumb joke, so you can't enjoy it. There's just very little of that stuff. And like, okay, he wanted this to be something else. This is not Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. This is not an adventure through miniature land. Still, there's like, he could have paid off a couple more times and kept a little lively thread throughout the movie. And it just really obviously tried not to. It erased some of the attempts it made, as we saw.
Once we get the 1 year later advance in time, the movie completely abandons the concept of downsizing. There's almost no reason for it to be in this Leisureland world. Nothing is set up for scale. At times, even to the detriment of like the realism of the movie, which we'll get into more, especially in the third act. There are some things that they do and places they go that you're like, that's impossible. Right. It just wouldn't work. And so it feels very lazy in that way.
It's definitely just being used as a device to go, what's a creative way to throw a middle-aged man out of his comfort zone and into a new world where he has to start building his life over? And you're like, okay, that's a really interesting device. And you keep wanting to see more of it. And they only give you the driest version of it. They don't have fun with it. They like to illustrate it as a sci-fi concept, but with no commentary. This is a very sort of flat, droll presentation of all the sci-fi stuff. We'll have to talk about each of those things as they come up in the story.
Speaking of which, you want to get us going through the plot points?
All right, let's jump right in. In Norway, Dr. Jürgen Asbjorn, let me try that again. In Norway, Dr. Jürgen Asbjornsen invents a process to shrink human beings down to 5 inches tall, and he starts a colony of downsized people. 10 years later, Paul Safronic, played by Matt Damon, is an occupational therapist who works for Omaha Steaks. Struggling a bit with money, Paul and his wife Audrey, played by Kristen Wiig, decide to downsize themselves and move to a miniaturized luxury enclave called Leisureland, where people with middle-class wealth can live like the ultra-rich. They say goodbye to friends and family, sell all their stuff, and report to Leisureland for the procedure. But when Paul wakes up small, he finds out that Audrey backed out. She stayed big, and she is leaving him.
Oof, it's a decent setup for a movie, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds good.
On the page, it reads fine.
The turn is huge. It's great. You're like, wow, I thought we were watching a sci-fi movie, and all of a sudden, boom, it's a marriage drama. Although we'll talk about that too, because it's played very strangely. It's not. It's just, they just shoehorn him out of the marriage like that, like nothing, with never a hint of follow-up.
I think Kristen Wiig backed out of making this movie halfway through filming or something, and they were like, oh, fuck, now what? Because she was like, this movie's terrible.
Yeah, I was hypothesizing about where the movie was going to take me. And at that point, I'm like, oh, they're breaking breaking up, but I'm pretty sure the second half of the movie, he goes back and lives with her in her house, and they're trying to make up with him being small and her being big. And that was a totally different movie. I don't know where I got that idea, but that is nothing.
How would that work?
Might be an interesting movie.
What would they do, like, sexually?
Oh, I don't know what movie you're making, but yeah, that could get kinky real quick.
Oh, yeah, you didn't think about it when you were theorizing that they were going to live as a married couple with him being 5 inches tall? Come on.
I just thought of him eating gigantic crackers.
Also, the little people colonies are all in these controlled bubbles. If you're living in somebody's house, you're going to come across some bugs. That's pretty scary.
The more I think about it, my version of the movie is a pretty good movie, showing this whole idea of like how people get to live in this.
Don't hurt your arm patting yourself on the back there.
It feels good, though. It goes through great lengths to set up how this cushy lifestyle is going to be for these people. And then we see how the real world relationships intervene. And all of a sudden, this guy has to live with what becomes a severe disability being in his wife's house. But no, that's not what this is about. So forget everything I just said.
Nope. Then he just stays in Leisureland by himself. But let's start at the beginning where the movie does. The actual problem they're solving is overpopulation. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like some media outlets are making declining birth rates seem like the crisis facing Earth right now, which is the exact opposite problem this movie theorized was the greatest challenge for Earth 5 years ago.
And I'd seen this concept pop up in the media on and off. Even I, who am not that well educated, knew that this was a touchy subject, that overpopulation was a popular concept in social science decades ago. And nowadays it's seen as, if not totally debunked, at least an idea that is dangerous to wield loosely, as this movie does, where the scientist gets up on stage and says, humanity's worst problem is overpopulation. And nowadays, the people who are sensitive to this try to separate the idea of overconsumption, which are the things that lead to the climate crisis that we're in, from overpopulation. Because if developed nations point to having too many babies as a problem, it becomes the underdeveloped world that suffers. Rich nations tell poor nations, you have to stop having kids. It has the potential for all kinds of nasty fallout. But our guys, Jim and Al, who wrote this movie, were not that sensitive to this topic in a way that I thought it would have been really easy for them to skirt around it and just talk about overconsumption instead of bringing up this old bogeyman.
If you're 5 inches tall, you consume a lot less fossil fuels and unrenewable resources. It seems like a very straight line to draw. You can still make your movie 99% the same. I wouldn't recommend it. I would change a lot of things, but it would have worked just fine if you were like, we're consuming too many fossil fuels. If we're 5 inches tall, we consume whatever smaller percentage of that. And it's just a simple thing. It just goes to speak more to the care that went into this movie, or lack thereof.
There's a lot of science in the first 10 minutes of the movie is just meeting these scientist characters and just watching them do stuff in a lab. And that gets back to the general dullness of this movie. We didn't really learn anything about these doctors' personalities or their desires and their conflicts. It was just like, let's just watch him inject a mouse and then run and tell his colleague that it worked. But I don't know. I've been focused on the start of movies because I've been spinning up a lot of movies trying to find something fun to watch and stopping a lot of them after 15 minutes. And this is another one I would have stopped if I didn't have to keep going, because it doesn't really hook you in. It just spends a lot of time illustrating this science fantasy rather than engaging you with characters.
And that's the thing. If you want to make that movie and have it be like a very clinical, science forward movie, that's your prerogative. But the movie flip-flops constantly between like hard science about this procedure and what it entails and what it would look like, and then just does stupid shit like having Jason Sudeikis sit on a cookie box and having a conversation with Matt Damon. So Jason Sudeikis is 5 inches tall. Matt Damon's 72 inches tall, let's say. Matt Damon wouldn't be able to fucking hear him. He doesn't have a megaphone. He doesn't, they're not like talking on a cell phone. And if Matt Damon was just talking to Jason Sudeikis at his regular conversational volume when he's that small and that close to him, wouldn't he just blow his eardrums out? You put so much work into the science of this movie and then you just fucking abandon it when it's convenient for you.
Yeah, which tells me that the science stuff, it's not necessarily that it's trying to be authentic, although because it's dry, it feels like it's trying to be authentic. I think that Alexander Payne thought that he was achieving some level of satire just by showing how mundane.
He definitely
this. Like, he presents this very wild, outlandish science fiction premise in this very dry way, and you're supposed to go, "Oh, that's so crazy how mundane it looks when they're just shrinking people and scooping them up with little pooper scoopers and putting them onto tiny gurneys."
I thought it was like a fish spatula.
Where we all see different things.
If my doctor pulled out a fish spatula, I'd leave. Clear.
It shows that he wants to turn you gently without tearing your delicate skin.
I think you're definitely right that he was going for satire here. And there is something that rings true about this life-saving invention you've come up with, this huge scientific breakthrough, and the only way to get people to do it is to let them live beyond what their normal means would have been as a regular person. Like, you have to capitalize on their greed to get them to sign up for it. And you made a note that the Safronic house that they end up buying isn't even nice, And it's not, but it's garish and it's big. It's like a McMansion. And I think that was an intentional choice. So there's definitely some commentary about the selfishness of humanity at play here, but it's so weak and flip-floppy that it never has a chance to take hold.
You say flip-floppy, and I've been trying to formulate a thought that's floating in my head about this, is that it has all these points, but it doesn't lean into any point of view very strongly. It undercuts itself. So rather than the characters becoming totally obsessed with the living large thing, they just play along. And like you said, their mansion then looks kind of shitty and just cheap. There's no moment where you are drawn into, oh, the character has bought into this luxury. And yeah, I bought it too, because look how fucking awesome it is. It's not awesome. He undercuts every point of view and waters them all down, which ends up meaning that the movie takes this sort of nihilistic tone where like everything sucks. Nothing is really worth getting too excited about. Everything feels emotionally watered down.
Just, I don't know why when we were talking about their house, I was thinking like, are they shrinking things like furniture, TVs, and appliances, or are they making them small from the get-go? Because I feel like that's almost as big a scientific breakthrough as making people small, is being able to make fucking TVs that operate and have decent resolution at that size.
Yeah, I think they have to make them because they do mention that the process is just for organic matter. So if you start thinking about that, it raises all these questions that they didn't touch of like,
right.
Why is it actually cheaper? Usually when you buy miniaturized stuff, it's more expensive than the regular full-size stuff.
Yeah, if it's not dollhouse furniture, if it's supposed to be functional, it's going to be way more expensive, at least for years until the technology catches up. Then it might be the same price as full-size things. Even clothes, you couldn't make like a cotton shirt because cotton, the fibers are too big. It wouldn't look like a shirt that we're used to.
Yeah, you'd have to reinvent all the manufacturing gear to make miniaturized stuff. So yeah, if you start poking too deeply, the premise starts to fall apart and you have to just kind of suspend your disbelief.
All right, so we've established the premise sucks and makes no sense. Let's get back into the movie and the things we hate about it. Matt Damon, like we mentioned, super bland performance on his part, but not much going on there. I guess we're supposed to get that he has a lack of ambition. He just is happy with the way things are, more or less. We get some hints that he was going to go to medical school to be a doctor. He ended up being an occupational therapist. Do factories have in-house occupational therapists? Is that a job?
I bought that. I feel like repetitive motion injuries got to be pretty common in that situation, and it's cheaper to be able to treat people and put them back on the production line, but I don't know.
By the way, never order Omaha steaks. A little tidbit. When I got my first apartment, my mom signed me up for Omaha steaks, and I enjoyed it. Their steaks are fine. They're good quality. The food is fine, but they will not stop bothering you for a fucking decade. We got another offer. Come back. We miss you.
Oh, yeah. Hard
and
sell.
Stuff in the mail, email, phone calls, you name it. They're a fucking pain in the ass. So fuck Omaha steaks. That's my tidbit of the week. Kiss my ass.
This movie doesn't give you a great feeling about them based on meeting Matt Damon, who's like, he's so mediocre. A perfect thing that encapsulates this movie. The first time we meet the guy, there's a flashback. It starts 10 years before. And it's just him watching the doctors announce that we invented downsizing. It's just him in a very average bar just going, hey, that's wild. And it's like the most mediocre non-reaction. And almost all his dialogue throughout the movie is like that. It's what an average, not interesting person would say in every situation. I don't know how we're supposed to want to be with this guy as our main character. And I didn't.
I get why Kristen Wiig leaves him at the, not at the altar, at the operating table, so to speak, or the recovery room. He's very unspectacular, boring, milquetoast. There's a million words you could throw out there about him. And that's clearly a choice because Matt Damon can play a dynamic character. We've seen him do it. We know he has another gear he can reach to and actually put in a good performance. He's choosing to play this guy very subdued, and he's probably being directed that way. And Kristen Wiig, all her great features that she has as an actor are being muted as well. And she just ends up being unlikable. They've stripped her of everything that makes her a person in the movie, her character, and they've stripped Kristen Wiig of everything that makes her effective as an actor. So we're just left with this kind of blank slate who we don't really understand or know. And then when she backs out, I guess we're supposed to be on Paul's side. You're like, no one should be with either of these people. They both suck.
Yeah, but suck in just a mild way, like everything else. Her defining characteristics are she gets stress headaches after work and she's concerned about money, and they want to buy a house, but they get turned down for their mortgage. But the house they show them looking at was too big for them anyway, based on their jobs and their incomes. But it was still,
it was like the house they move into in Leisureland. I'm sure that was an intentional parallel.
Exactly. So again, the movie almost tried to indict them for wanting too much. Oh, they thought they could live larger than their means, and they were unhappy when they realized they couldn't get that mortgage. But it's so subtle that, again, it's like a sort of half-baked point. Anyway, I'm going on too long about the milquetoast of the characters and of the point of views that the movie throws at you.
One thing the movie actually did well, I think, is in the lead up to them downsizing, it throws a lot of charismatic actors at us, giving charismatic performances, extolling the virtues of downsizing. And I thought that was effective to show not only these fun performances in a movie that desperately needs them from guys like Jason Sudeikis or Neil Patrick Harris, Laura Dern, James Vanderbeek. He's not downsized, but he's in there. And he's actually like having fun. And it is a good juxtaposition with what we've seen with our two main characters up to this point that are so boring and just dreadful to watch. So it's like, oh, maybe being downsized is fun. Because look, Laura Dern's in a bathtub covered in diamonds and Neil Patrick Harris is being all showmany. And you're like, oh, like that doesn't look so bad. Also, we get a great cameo from Margot Martindale. And this brings me to my justified crossover of the week.
Justified crossover of the week.
Wow.
Boom, Margot Martindale, Mags Bennett, season 2 of Justified. One of the best seasons of television ever. One of the best single season characters on television ever. If you have not seen season 2 of Justified, can't recommend it enough. She's terrifying in it.
Oh, shit.
Great performance. But
I love that. I knew she was a face that I recognized in this, but she's downsized. She plays a miniature person who says hello to them on the bus ride. And
yeah, it's easy to miss that it's her because they don't really close up on her.
They don't do one close up. They do her from across the aisle, her little face poking through the air hole on the small people side of the bus. You could miss her real easy.
Another thing I thought that was an interesting path the movie could have gone with is there's this scene right before they have the procedure where they're at the bar saying goodbye to their friends and family, and it's late. Clearly, most people have left the party. And this kind of stereotypical red state dickhead is giving them a hard time about how they don't deserve a vote because they're not spending as much money. They're not paying as much taxes. They're not stimulating the economy. Why do they get a say in the future of the country? And there's some real tension between people who are downsizing and people who are staying regular size. I was like, that's an interesting thread. I hope the movie doesn't abandon it completely. And it did. So yeah, we lose out on potentially like, also just imagine if that guy found out where Leisureland was and like, I'll fucking show them, and just went and kicked over their little net and was just like, all right, it's a Godzilla movie now, bitch.
Yeah, your version of the movie may be even more interesting than my Matt Damon living at Kristen Wiig's house, like drunk bar bro, kicks sand on the poor tiny people.
Or just picks up a lobster and leaves it nearby. Because we learned that lobsters can't be shrunk. Shellfish can't go through the procedure for some reason.
Yeah, that was a little tidbit they snuck in there.
Just drop off some lobsters. And if they find their way over there, that's on them. I'm just putting them here. But yeah, they kind of abandon that thread. And it just becomes this really strange movie in the second half. But we're not ready to talk about the second half yet. What did you think about the actual transformation, the whole process of it?
It's kind of humorous. They have to subject themselves to these indignities, getting all their body hair shaved off. And they really spend time making the point. It's not just the eyebrows. It's all of it. We're going to show you quite a lot of it. And then you have to have all your fillings removed. So that's painful. And then you have to have them put back.
You have to get an enema.
Yeah, exactly. It felt real. I kind of liked the touches of reality. They're pushing all these people into the chamber. Just the way it's enacted. The last guy does a last walkthrough to make sure it's okay to close the chamber, and he throws the switch. That all felt real, but it also felt like, oh, that was tedious. What's the point? Does he think that there's some great irony here, or it's just that it's so mundane and real, something whimsically crazy is happening, and we're supposed to somehow get a thrill out of it?
I think it's about stripping the whimsy from the whole concept of the movie and making it feel like a cold, sterile process. But the movie needs more whimsy. Don't take that from us.
Yeah, he didn't want to go funny. There were opportunities to go funnier. Shaving someone's eyebrow was funny because people look terrible afterwards. Matt Damon looks horrible for a couple scenes. Painful to look at him.
It's a famous scene from The Sopranos. AJ's friends shave his eyebrows when he's asleep one day.
And then they use it for this one moment of humor, this really painful moment when his wife leaves him. She's got one eyebrow, and there's this extreme close-up. She's on the phone from the airport telling him that she's not coming back. And it's the one moment of Kristen Wiig comedy where like she can really get a laugh out of you by being a weird, screwed up looking lady in a heightened emotional state yelling into a phone. But you're not sure to laugh because the tone of the movie is not about laughing at these things. It's very serious. And Matt Damon's character gets extremely mad in a way that we've never seen him react to anything. We didn't know he was that volatile until this moment.
I don't know if it's supposed to paint him as volatile. It is a pretty fucked up situation from his point of view. So I can understand why he's having a heightened response to.
I'm not saying he overreacted. His wife just let him shrink, stayed big, and told him she's leaving him all in one move.
And then she's out of the movie. We don't even see her at the divorce settlement a year later. She doesn't even show up for that. So it really does feel, it's a jarring shift from this character you just spent, I don't know, half an hour with. Is just gone now. She's not dead. Nothing wrong with her. She just is out of the movie.
Yeah, I guess if we felt more affinity for Matt Damon's Paul character, that would actually endear us to him. Because it's like, oh shit, we're alone now. We thought we had a wife and a family and a future, and we just got dropped off in a fucking fantastical land where we have nothing and nobody. And it's pretty jarring, but like we don't really care about him. He's just been a dull weirdo the whole time.
What else from the first section did you want to talk about?
I noticed that we've both had trouble saying Sophronic. One of the indignities that Paul Paul Safronic suffers. Everyone says his name wrong.
Safronic.
And it's not really a joke. It's just this indignation that he suffers. And first he's constantly correcting people. And then in the end, he's, yeah, that's me. But again, it was a little jab without a particular meaning. I don't know what that meant.
I think Alexander Payne just wanted podcasters a few years from the release of this movie to have a hard time when they were trying to shit on this movie, saying the characters' names.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a recurring thread that I guess is just supposed to show how by the end he's beaten down by the world. But I think there's enough evidence of that already. And like the movie's kind of mean. And I feel like Alexander Payne movies often have a mean layer underneath what's going on up top. But I don't know, it just doesn't work as well in this movie as it did in like Sideways. Because like you said, the Sideways characters are terrible.
Yeah.
They're mean-spirited, horrible people. But for whatever reason, they were compelling to watch because they were played by actors who were actually giving performances.
Yeah, they were really active, opinionated, strong-willed, doing big things rather than just going along. And that's this character, Paul Safronic, just goes along. He occasionally has opinions, but you know when he says his opinions, they're just like boring guy opinions. Oh, that seems really cool. We should probably do that. And it's not grounded in any deep desires in his soul unless there's ones that you project onto him from your own experience.
It's almost funny how easily he goes along with what anybody tells him to do.
It happens over and over.
Like he gets downsized when he's at Dushan's house for the parties. Oh, just come in and enjoy the party. Like, okay. When he starts working with Knock, when he goes to Norway, when he gets talked into going into the vault, like everything, nothing's his idea. He has no agency at all.
He's just a go-along dude, and it's tiresome to have a main character like that. That's why we end up gravitating towards Knock Lan, who's at least got some spark to her.
He's like an audience surrogate, but as the main character, which becomes exhausting because he's just an idiot and a babe in the woods the whole time. And it's not what you want from the character you're supposed to be rooting for.
Exactly. The movie is telling you you're a boring piece of shit, and this is you. Look at yourself on screen, you dumbass. And I'm like, oh, that hurts. Don't tell me that.
Ow, Alexander Payne. I did not appreciate that. All right, you want me to walk you through the middle part of the movie?
Yeah, let's try to meet some more exciting people in this section.
We actually meet a couple exciting people in this section.
Nice.
It's a year later, and Paul's divorce is final. With less money, he's forced to downsize, into a small apartment and take a job as a Land's End customer service rep. Frustrated after a failed date, Paul lets loose at the wild party of his upstairs neighbor, Dushan, an aging Serbian playboy played by Christoph Waltz. The next morning, Paul volunteers his therapist skills to help Dushan's housekeeper with her prosthetic leg. She turns out to be famous Vietnamese dissident Ngoc Lan Tran, played by Chau, and she drags him back to her apartment to help her sick friend. Later, in trying to fix Ngoc's foot, Paul breaks her prosthetic. So until she can get a new foot, Paul is forced to help Ngoc complete her housekeeping jobs, plus her volunteer work helping the underprivileged service workers of Leisureland. Then when Dushan invites Paul on a trip to the original downsized colony in Norway, Ngoc Lan reveals she was previously invited by Dr. Asbjornsen, and she insists on coming with them. That was,
oh, man,
you fucker. You will never convince me. You don't do this on purpose.
I didn't write this script, man. This is just when these characters pop up. Ngoc Lan, Dushan.
You can't put an O with a line through it in my section of the synopsis. It's unfair.
Hey, I had him too. He's actually in all three. He keeps popping up
he is.
as Bjornson. But I kept that in. I copied and pasted because I wasn't sure how to make the /O. But like because they say as Bjornson. So I'm like, okay, that reminds us it's not a straight O. I don't know. We're pretending to be respectful to Norwegians.
We are. We're trying our best. Or no, we're not. That's the point. We're not trying our best. We're doing the bare minimum. So this section, it gets a little injection of personality with Christoph Waltz and Chau showing up, but still not great. And also, like I mentioned, by the time the divorce is settled, the whole downsizing concept, it has no place anymore. We don't see anything for scale, really, except I think a tambourine, or that might even be later. And there's just nothing to differentiate this world from the real world.
Oh, yeah. There's a full-size rose that makes an appearance in this section, which is the only thing to remind you that we're in this land. But yeah, it's really just a movie about a guy who now, in the conventional sense, downsized, got a divorce, had to move into an apartment, and is trying to date again and figure out what to do with his life. And actually, like you said, that's when it starts getting interesting, because even the idea that he's going on a date blew my mind. He goes, I have a date. And you go, what? Wait, really? And then he just really literally like met this lady and had her over and cooked her some nice dinner. And she's played by Carrie Kenny Silver, who you might know from Reno 911, is really hilarious in that.
Yeah, she's great in that.
And she's great in this as just like ultimately boring lady who matches his style, but actually turns him down at the end, saying she's not sure she's ready. And then he's like, okay, never mind. He's kind of a dick. I don't know. It's kind of realistic. They're both wounded, newly single people, and they just have a hard time connecting.
Surprised he cooked for her and didn't take her to one of the 3 3 cheesecake factories in Leisureland.
The Tony Romas that we saw on the way in.
Hey, don't hate on Tony Roma's. They got good ribs.
I'll do a Tony Roma.
We did get some Olive Garden product placement as well. Thought I was in a Sonic movie.
Now that you say that, having real brand names like Omaha Steaks, like Land's End that he goes to work for, I think that's part of Alexander Payne's satire is like, hey, I'm just crazy enough to actually name drop real brands in my movies and suggest that they are part of the boring American monoculture. Isn't that fun?
Right. It's like the most base level of, haha, I know that thing. Like, it's really playing to like the lizard brain of humanity. That's probably why it works. It still feels weird and wrong. So then the party scene where he confronts Dushan, who's through context, we can discern that he's been throwing these wild parties with pretty frequent regularity when he's not taking boat rides to Norway. And instead of them having a big fight, Dushan charms him into hanging out, and he goes through this party, has a wild time, takes some drugs that he doesn't know what they are. And the line when he tells the girl who's offering him the pill, I need to know I have allergies, was probably the only time I laughed out loud in the movie.
I had a laugh shortly after that line. And this is a testament to Matt Damon's acting in this, which you can be fooled into thinking he's not acting, but he really is. He comes out of the bathroom after trying to cough up the pill, unsuccessfully barf it back up. He comes out of the bathroom high as fuck, and he's just strolling through this loud dance party with the lights flashing. And just that stupid grin on his face, that got a laugh out of me.
Yeah, no, this section of the movie is probably the strongest for me because it's starting to actually try to do stuff.
Yeah, and our hero is active and like he's experiencing something new.
Yeah, you get the sense that he was pretty sheltered growing up and probably didn't have a lot of wild parties in his youth.
Yeah.
So it's like getting downsized is like he's going to college.
Exactly. And everything's exciting until the next morning when we get back into the stilted, boring Paul.
Yep, that's when he meets Naklan in a very weird exchange that they have in Dushan's apartment.
Yeah.
When she shows up to clean it.
Yeah, there's a moment with an interesting bit of action where she's taking prescription drugs out of Dushan's cabinet and he thinks she's stealing and there's a kind of little bit of tension and then she's, no, he lets me take everything. And he was honestly just having watched her walk. He's such a dedicated occupational therapist. He's like, I need to help this lady. She needs to change her gait and adjust her prosthetic. And then when he gets up close, he's like, I know you. And it's this really stilted couple of lines where he's like, I can help you. Oh, I know you. You're the lady. That's you. And again, it's like just driving home. What a boring nerd this is. He couldn't just relate to this woman in a more authentic way.
And it raises the question of why make her have this background, this kind of tragic backstory about coming from Vietnam in a box and being the only dissident to survive, and she was shrank against her will. Like, what does that ultimately add to their dynamic and their character? Obviously, it spells out that she's been through some hard times and maybe puts what he thinks has been his string of bad luck in perspective a little bit.
That's what it
But
did
ultimately,
for me.
yeah, you could have achieved that, I think, in a much less roundabout way. I don't know. It was an interesting choice. It feels like a remnant of a past draft of a screenplay.
It's kind of in there also as just a plot key because when she then invites herself on the trip to Norway, she has an unassailable reason why she should be allowed to come along because the doctor, having known who she was world famous after this incident, had corresponded with her directly and told her, come to the Norway colony anytime. So she has this real reason to go when otherwise it would have been just her being an annoying person who said, you need to take me along.
Yeah, that's true. You've answered my question.
Yeah.
And then let's talk about the neighborhood she lives in, which is like the first time we're really getting a glimpse at the outskirts of Leisureland and how the underprivileged there live. It makes you wonder, and I'm not saying we don't have real problems in regular sized world with caring for the underprivileged, but like what kind of oversight is there in this world? What kind of programs are available for people that have been downsized, like social programs? It doesn't seem like there's any safety net here at all, which kind of undermines the whole idea of making a utopian society.
And we're left to speculate about all that stuff. Just like we saw, the science stuff has enough grounding that it seems realistic, but then when you look closer, it leaves all these questions. The social commentary has just enough grounding to seem realistic and like biting commentary of class issues, but it really doesn't tell you want to know more right away. Like, how did these people get to Leisureland? Were they shrunken against their will? Are they indentured servants who agreed to be shrunk in return for their labor? And then why are they being treated like this? And who's in charge of this? And it really just leaves all that wide open to speculation because it doesn't offer you any details.
Have they shrunk the appropriate number of like government employees to help them so that there's like a ratio that makes sense of, no, serious. though. Are there little FEMA people? Are there little social workers?
They're
and
not.
if there are, there's not that I could see.
Yeah, because Sanok Lan has taken on herself to be the one and only source of aid for these people. She's bringing everybody dinner who's otherwise going to go hungry in this big apartment complex. That being said, it was an effective reveal. There are some things that Payne does in this movie without explaining that are good. Like sometimes it's good not to over-explain. Paul and Nok Lan are on this bus and they're heading across town. It's a long drive. And then you see them turn into this neighborhood and Paul's looking at the houses. And instead of the McMansions of his neighborhood, now we see it's single family homes and they're all single story and they've got laundry hanging in the yard. And you're like, oh, okay, now this is where the lower middle class live. But it's not. That's a fake out. The bus keeps going and it goes through a literal hole in the wall. And on the other side is just the saddest conditions for Nok and the people like her to live in. Just very shoddily converted construction trailers or whatever they are. They're just the most dramatic contrast. Half the stuff in them hasn't even been miniaturized. Everything is really shoddy.
And they're outside the net,
Right.
which is notable because a single raindrop would murder them, I think.
Oh, they've got a little net stapled up, but it's not as good. It's
Okay.
got a dead pigeon in it, so it's not being maintained very well.
But then at the end of the movie, when they're running supplies in and out, they're getting pouring rain on them at the same location, I'm fairly certain. So do they just get rid of the net because that's how the Norwegians lived?
I don't know. I think everyone gets some rain, though. I think at that scene, all of Leisureland was getting rained on. Maybe it's toned down a little bit for the people in the fancy
Maybe the net
neighborhood.
has some kind of shrinking capabilities of the...
Maybe it's a finer net and it sloughs off some of the excess water. Because, yeah,
Imagine getting hit with a full-size raindrop when you're 5 inches tall.
exactly. The raindrops are one thing that they didn't reckon with. They reckon with some of the miniaturization of other things, of bodies of water. But yeah, just a puddle that would normally form on the ground when it rains like it does in this movie would become an impassable lake for these people at this size.
Also, what if a bug shows up? I can't let go of the bug thing. What if a bunch of ants find your house? You're screwed.
That's true. They're in the desert. There's some nasty red ants and shit under the ground and scorpions. I don't know how these people are not just torn to pieces every morning.
Bullet ant would be the size of a Great Dane to you. It could murder you.
Yeah, there's none of that. They just hand wave it away. They're just like, there's nets, so there's no mosquitoes and there's no birds and everything's nice.
Oh, can you imagine mosquitoes?
Scary.
They drink all your blood in like 10 seconds.
Yeah, it has some
Horrifying.
scary Morbius action.
Like the callback. And then Nok Lan basically euthanizes her friend.
Yeah, that was a dark moment.
Some Percocet she stole from Dushan.
She is so noble that she met this older lady who has advanced stomach cancer. She explains that she had taken her to the clinic. The doctor said, there's nothing you can do. Just take her home and try to make her comfortable. So if you follow all the dialogue, they justify that she's pretty close to death and she's in a palliative care situation anyway. So she's just like, Paul, tell me which of these drugs is strongest and give me more than you thought because I need to just make her comfortable. But in the next scene, just a few days later, she's like, oh yeah, she died, but I gave her a lot of pills. She died happy, smiling.
I guess if you're going to go, there's worse ways.
Yeah, I mean, that lady was certainly better off having Nok Lan helping her than she would have been otherwise.
And then we get the big moment where we're all going to Norway. It's a road trip.
Yeah.
And Nok Lan gives a very spirited speech.
I was moved. She cries in it, and I was almost to tears with her. It's tears of joy because she realizes she's come to this place in her life where finally everything's settled enough she can accept this invitation from Dr. Asbjornsen, who had long ago said, please come to Norway. He was the one whose writing made her okay with being small and accept her situation. And so it's very emotional for her. She's so happy that they're going to go. And they're like, oh, you're not invited. And then by the end of the speech, there's no saying no to her.
Can you imagine if they just left her behind? Yeah. But it wouldn't be like out of character for this movie.
No.
All right. You ready to take us home?
Yeah, let's sail it home. Here we
right.
go. Sailing up the Norwegian fjords, Paul and Nok Lan meet Dr. Asbjornsen, who is depressed over the realization that downsizing has been too little, too late to reverse global warming. Humanity is destined for extinction. Then Paul and Nok Lan realize that they have feelings for each other and they spend a romantic night together on the boat. At the colony, Paul learns that they've built an underground vault in which a small group will live for 8,000 years and ride out the coming apocalypse. And Paul decides to join them, even though it means leaving Nok Lan behind. She wants to stay behind and live out her life helping whoever she can. At the very last moment, Paul realizes he loves Nok Lan and abandons the vault to be with her. Together, they go back to Leisureland and help people in need.
Womp womp.
Is that a womp
Let's
womp?
start. I don't want to make this whole podcast me having logical objections
Right.
to the scenes in this movie. How the fuck are they sailing a boat that's 10 inches long in a real river with real water that acts like water? Like, I'm terrified of water in a regular sized boat. These people are using a boat the size of the one my kids use in the bathtub. How is the smallest ripple just not a tsunami that kills them instantly?
Like we said in the last section, section, we had to suspend our disbelief about bigger things. And now they're just like, they're in fantasy.
This was a bridge too far for me to suspend. Yeah, this is too stupid. Also, it would take fucking forever.
Yeah.
To in that boat with this tiny little engine.
It becomes very whimsical, like Wes Anderson levels. They're on this beautiful fjord and the water is just perfectly smooth, which is part of the effects they do, that the bodies of water all have this smoothness that looks like miniatures, right? Because to them, we're like very close up on the water. But yeah, what about just waves? And what about creatures swimming in that water who would just jump up and fuck them up?
You can't shrink fish and lobsters. Fuck are they going to do if a shrimp smells them, decides he's hungry?
And the thing is,
they got no nets.
Clearly, they relied on the help of large-sized people to get most of the way. They got on a plane. Somebody picked them up in a box and took them off that plane, and instead of taking them to the colony, put them on tiny boats and pushed them off into this fjord.
Put them on a Fisher-Price boat. It was like, here you go, bud. There you go. Have fun. Good luck.
I guess there's something about the actual location of the Norway colony is unknown, so I guess that was part of the plot, that they had to sail there themselves because not everyone is told where to find this place. But yeah,
probably good to keep the vault location a secret.
Exactly. But some of it does break down. And then, like you said, you get to the colony itself and they've got no net. They're more rugged. They've got full-size plants instead of all the miniaturized plants that Leisureland had. And there's one throwaway line about, oh, we're too close to the sea for mosquitoes. And the birds decided they don't like us or something, and then they just hand wave it away.
Is that how mosquitoes work? I've been bitten by mosquitoes at the fucking beach. So I don't think that's scientifically accurate. I don't think you understand shit about oceans or mosquitoes.
Yeah, probably not.
Not you, Alexander Payne.
No, yeah, I was standing in for Al Payne there.
Oh, careful. Don't do that right now. I'm mad at you if you do that. I'll just yell at you for the last 20 minutes. The one thing that rings true in this section is the method that we're all going to go extinct by, because it is probably the method we're all going to go extinct by.
It's pretty chilling. It goes, yeah, didn't you hear on the news that these methane bubbles started popping up in the Arctic, and there was this cascading situation of accelerated heating and more methane coming up? And like, we've been hearing that's a possibility forever. And the way it unfolds in this movie is chillingly like the way you can imagine it unfolding in real life. Like, we hear some news stories, we hope it's not as bad as we think, some time passes, and all of a sudden everyone looks around and goes, oh yeah, it's over. This is it.
To be clear, Dr. Asbjornsen makes it sound like it's happening tomorrow, but Dushan later is like 300-400 years from now. It has nothing to do with you. Why are you going to go into the vault? So it doesn't sound like it's imminent, but like we've basically passed the point of no return, which is scary because I think we've got like 3 years till we do in real life.
Could be. It's hard to even think about.
It will be. We're not going to do anything to curb global warming. Are you kidding me? We tried. Nobody gives a shit. We've given up as a species.
Dark.
Oh man, I hope you cut this. This is pretty sad.
This might be the darkest Blast Zone has ever gotten.
If the movie was any good, it could distract me from all this, but no, it's not. We've done a string of movies I didn't like. We need to fix that. I feel like I went in a movie I liked since like Blue Chips.
It feels like it's our job to handle these movies no matter what we feel about them and give them a fair shake, but it can take a toll on you.
Yeah. Next week's movie I actually like though, so.
Okay. So in the midst of this very dark time that all of our characters are having, our two main characters spark up a little romance. What did you make of that?
Weird.
Yeah.
He's rubbing lotion on her nub and she gets orgasmic close to it. She's moaning a little bit. She closes her eyes. And then when her eyes are closed and she's almost asleep, Paul just plants a big old date rapey kiss on her lips.
Yeah.
Don't kiss sleeping people.
It's weird. Yeah. Was she, I didn't take it that she was supposed to be
asleep. She wasn't asleep. No, but her eyes were closed.
If you felt like it was going that way, that could get pretty creepy. And he immediately apologizes and says, no, I want this. So the necessary consent does occur in that scene, but it's not a very good chemistry scene. And these are characters that are very difficult to relate to their chemistry. Like, you get it. They're both just sad, lonely people living a hard life. And you get why when they're thrown together and they're both single that they might hook up. But it's not an inspiring hookup. Would you agree?
No. And their relationship up to this point has been mostly antagonistic, where they're constantly bickering and yelling at each other. And none of it ever felt like it comes so out of left field when they have a romantic connection eventually, because there really has not been any hints dropped that either one of them is developing feelings for the other at any point. Like, maybe they're becoming friends, but there's nothing romantic about their interactions up to that point.
I think that's true. And it's not the kind of bickering of people who are feeling an attraction for each other. It's the kind of bickering that's based on he really is an annoying lump and she's a very dynamic, demanding person. And so it ends up with her yelling at him a lot. And that doesn't feel like it leads to romance.
It would be like randomly making out with the coworker you hate for no reason. You kind of yelling at them. They're not pulling their weight. They're not doing their job. You have to show them how to do everything all the time. And all of a sudden they just start making out with you. That was more how it felt. It wasn't earned.
And yet that could still happen when you're on a boat together and it's the end of the world. So it's realistic, but it's a depressing kind of realism.
Especially the character of Knock Land. Like, doesn't she deserve real romance that's not just born out of tragedy and despair, but this is the best she can hope for.
I think his good side is supposed to shine through, that he's actually really wants to be helpful in the same way that she does, because he does reach out and fix everybody's health issues proactively. That's
broke her foot.
He's clumsy. He overreached with trying to fix the foot when he didn't really know what he was doing.
If a golden retriever tried to do open heart surgery on you, like he really wanted to save you, would you call that being helpful?
It would be cute. It would be charming.
If he just murdered you immediately? Yeah, I'm trying my best, man. This is all I got.
It would be so cute. Can you imagine him?
He's the golden retriever scenario. I know.
In the scrubs and the little surgeon's hat.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty cute. I'm going to write the movie. Airbud 9, med school. There's technically nothing in the rule book. It says a golden retriever can't be a surgeon. There's so many streaming services now. Somebody would pick that up.
They would.
I'm going to get working on it. But I see what you're saying. Like, he is trying to be helpful, but he's bad at it. She has to pester him constantly. I don't know. Like, when me and my wife were doing a project around the house that involves any level of motor skills, and I'm just like in the way, I'm not sitting there like, I bet she's really happy that I'm trying to help.
I bet she's turned on right now.
I'm thinking like, she's probably really annoyed at me. So I don't know. It's a weird dynamic between them for sure. And then we get to the settlement. They've completely gone Midsommar on us.
Yeah.
They're going to crown a new May Queen any day now. They're like, they say all the right things. They seem nice enough, but Dushan was right. They do seem like a cult.
They do. And his prediction that they're going to end up murdering each other down there in the vault it's pretty plausible. You're like, oh, you're right. Maybe I shouldn't go down there.
It does ring true. Yeah, they're going to go stir crazy. The vault itself is a wild technical achievement to the degree where it's unbelievable that they have done all this in 10 years. I know that they make the statement like, would never have been possible if we weren't shrunk down, but it doesn't seem like they have regular sized construction people coming in and building things for them. So how does being shrunk down help them at all? How does that make it easier?
Yeah, that should have made it harder, because the idea is that this has been done in total secret. So it's different if you had the full resources of full-size people to make a vault for little people. Would be much easier to do. But this looks like a crazy level of achievement.
Almost a impossible level of achievement, some might say.
And Paul's excited because he goes along with anything that looks interesting. He's like, that's wild. I got to get down there.
I like that he regretted it when he was like 100 feet from the entrance. They didn't even give him like a scene where he has to run back for like an hour. He's literally, he could see the entrance to the vault.
Yeah.
And just backs out at the last moment. I think it would have been a braver ending to have him get all the way down there and be alone and just have a look on his face. Oh, shit. I fucked up.
And then it's Knock Land's story, and she's the one who's moving forward, and he's once again stuck somewhere.
Or then the movie ends. This movie's such a downer, just ended on a down note.
Yeah, instead they picked this, what was really like a rom-com ending, right? Like, here's a guy, he's said goodbye to the girl, he's walked away, he's literally wheeling a roller suitcase. It has very much airport vibes, and then he turns around.
This is the airport scene from a romance. Yeah, you nailed it. I didn't even think of that. The parallels are so obvious.
Classic running through the airport. No, wait, I decided I love her. And he abandons his suitcase and slips right through the vault door just before it closes, and comes back and tells her he loves her. And it's like,
no, he doesn't he does not tell her he loves her.
Oh.
He tells her it was a love fuck.
It was a love fuck. Yeah. We skipped over her 8 kinds of fuck speech, which was not as inspiring as her I'm going to Norway speech, I have to say.
She asked him what kind of fuck he gave her. Was it a pity fuck? Or she lists like Ian said 8 of them, which is a lot more than you think. And he declines to answer at that time, but that's his big line when he runs out. It was a love fuck. It lands like a fucking lead balloon.
It's cringy, and they know it's cringy, and he tells her it's cringy, which is part of the cringe when she's describing the 8 different kinds of fucks. He's like, you got to stop saying fuck. It sounds awful. And that doesn't make it any better.
This movie's rated R, and the only reasons I could think of are the fuck speech and the like 8 different dongs we see in the beginning.
Yep. Those were very important. Really, Alexander Payne, I got to show the Johnsons laid out from like eye level on the gurneys as we scoot past each one of them.
Hey, we've had our share of boobs in movies for years. It's time we flip the script a little bit, show some dongs. I did notice doing research for this movie that Norway is where we have the global seed vault. I wonder if that was some inspiration for why they put this civilization there.
I've heard of that. I think I also heard, sadly, that it's been somewhat corrupted, that it was placed in this extreme northerly location so that it would stay permanently frozen, and the temperatures have now reached unexpected new highs, and so it may be compromised at this point.
If you have any climate anxiety, skip this episode.
It's too late. Let's talk about what was good about this last section. I have 2 things I can bring up.
Was there anything good?
Small moments. Just like we said, I appreciated that the director did that little fake out with, we think we're in the bad side of town and it gets unexpectedly worse, and he didn't bother explaining it. Another scene he doesn't explain, where the members of the colony enjoy their last sunset. They're about to go down into the vault and never see the sun again for 8,000 years. And no one says, hey, let's go watch our last sunset, or I can't believe this is the last sunset. No one says anything. They're just all standing there watching the sunset, and you know what's happening. And you're like, okay, I get it. Thank you for not explaining. That moment was more meaningful because you didn't say anything.
That's true. That was a decent scene. I also like the Dushan character. I found him a little grating in the middle section, but when they're actually in Norway, I started to dig his vibe a little more. When Knockland tells him that Paul wants to go into the vault, like his casual incredulousness, I thought was like very true to his character in a response. And also because I've caught myself being like, oh, I'd go into the vault. Let's go into the vault. Yeah, fuck it. Let's do it. And then he put things in perspective in an interesting way. And I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer, if going into the vault is the right move or staying out and facing eventual certain death. But like, he's got no kids. It's just him. He'll probably be long gone before the real effects of the methane start being felt. It's like, live out your days. I don't know.
Yeah.
It is like a moral puzzle that the movie throws at you at the end unexpectedly.
Yeah, and I think that ambiguity to it is something in its favor. And I think that Knockland's argument that let's just be here and help the people we can while we're here, like that was compelling. So I didn't disagree with what the movie was putting forward at that point. It took a while to get there. And I don't know if that was the best way to sell that.
It took a while to get there, and tell me what changes if they're not small during this entire last section.
Yeah, you could tell the same story with some other device besides small people and a tiny vault. Be the same thing.
You don't even need another device. The world's ending. We have friends who have an inn at this settlement in Norway where they're planning to. That's a setup for a movie. So is shrinking yourself so you can live more lavishly and hopefully make a smaller global footprint. Like, those are two ideas for two different movies. You can't just mash them together like a sandwich ball. Sorry, I was watching Detroiters and they make a sandwich ball.
And then there's the movie where you shrink people down and funny stuff happens because of the juxtaposition of sizes. And one funny thing happens in this last scene. As Paul's running out of the tunnel, the guy who's sealing the vault door is like, no, leave your bag, run, because we're about to blow the mountainside and seal up the tunnel. And so they all run and they go around the corner to hide from this big explosion. And it's this tiny little poofed explosion and a little piece of rock goes, and that was a laugh moment because it was just a silly anticlimactic. You realize how small the rock was that just fell and sealed this mountain.
What's their plan to get out eventually, though, then?
They must have some digging.
They do say in 8,000 years they're going to try to come back out of there.
They must have had some substantial digging machines to get out. I think they just blew the mountain to hide their entry point so that they wouldn't be discovered until they were ready.
In case there's another bunch of small people in that part of Norway, because like a regular-sized person would probably walk right by it.
That's the thing. That's where, again, the science fell down for me. Is like they had this great explanation of how they had constructed this geothermal energy and all this ability to do agriculture underground, but it's still one point of failure. If you're actually trying to make lifeboats and rescue the human species, you have to make more than one of these things. This can't be the only one because it's so small and so vulnerable. Just an earthquake or a flood or something could just wreck it. And then, oops, I guess that was the end.
Not to mention that you've more or less condemned the human race to be small in a world that, like, we will no longer be the dominant species in 8,000 years when we come out of that hole. We're 5 inches tall.
True.
And the world has creatures and we're not going to have any more nets. We're not going to have any more safety measures in place. We're going to have to survive. We're going to basically be like so many ants.
Man, this movie has so many ways to bum you out. I can't believe you're still discovering them.
They're going to walk out of this hole in 8,000 years and some newfangled bird with 3 heads that we've never seen before is going to eat them all in 5 seconds. And then that's going to be the end of the human race anyway.
I'm glad we stayed out and just decided to help Mr. Ramirez and give him a nice dinner when he was hungry.
Yeah, and that's Downsizing, a movie that now I will never have to watch again, now that I've covered it for this podcast.
Yeah, let's put it in a vault, blow the doors, seal it up with a tiny little rock.
All right. You want to hear some information about the people that were involved in the making of this movie and what they went on to do?
Yeah, this happened 5 years ago. So what's happened since then?
Chau was actually nominated for Best Supporting Actress at the Golden Globe. She didn't get an Oscar nomination for it, but she was nominated for a bunch of awards for Best Supporting Actress for this role. So people did latch on to that character. It was one of the National Board of Review's 10 best films of 2017.
Wow.
Or 2018, because it was released so late.
It was a December movie.
Yeah, it was a Christmas movie. Real feel-good Christmas film. The fuck were they thinking? But I was shocked to see that. The National Board of Review's top 10 usually is pretty much in line with critically acclaimed films. I went back for a few years to see what other movies they'd done. This was really the main outlier I spotted. People didn't like this movie. Critics and audiences both disliked it. It was jarring to see it up there.
You know, I brought a ton of goodwill to Morbius, which nobody liked but me. And I don't know, who are these critics that you have to somehow love the Matt Damon character and then maybe you can go along with, oh my gosh, look at everything that's happening to this poor guy. He's just like me. But I don't know, I was not into him. And I just had very little good feeling towards this movie.
I did too. Yeah, I fucking hate this movie. Let's talk about Alexander Payne and what he went on to do after this. The answer is nothing. We already mentioned he's making The Holdovers, but he did have a script that he was supposed to direct called The Menu, which is a very interesting movie coming out later this year, I believe. It is a horror comedy or super dark black comedy. He was going to have it with Emma Stone in the lead role. There were scheduling conflicts. Mark Mylod is now taking over as the director, and Anya Taylor-Joy is going to replace Emma Stone. I believe there's a poster out for this already. There might even be a trailer for it, but I'm trying to stay in the dark about it because it sounds like a movie that I'm going to like. I think they're eating people.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
And Hong Chau's in it.
And Hong Chau's in it too. Yeah, look at this. I wonder if she was a holdover from Payne, like he cast her in it when he was supposed to be making it. Because he does seem to go back to the same actors. On a darker note, in August 2020, Rose McGowan did accuse Payne of statutory rape. She said that they had a sexual encounter when she was 15 and he was 28. Payne admitted they had a sexual encounter, but maintained that it was later when she was already 18, which that age gap is unsavory to begin with, though. Doesn't engender me to like him much.
No, I had forgotten that story. I remember hearing that story, and thankfully, I guess, maybe, I don't know, we struggle with this all the time. That was not on my mind watching this movie or talking about it for the majority of this podcast until you just reminded me right now. I was not inclined to be feeling very charitable towards Payne until now, and certainly much less at this point.
Right. I mean, you can take solace in the fact that you think this movie sucks on its own merits.
I guess that's good. I judged it fairly.
As far as his writing partner, Jim Taylor, who we worked on the screenplay for this movie and all his movies so far with, all the movies he's written, I should say. Payne does have a few movies that he did not write, but any movie he has a writing credit on, Jim Taylor also does. And the stuff Taylor's done outside of his work with Payne is interesting. He's only got a couple screenwriting credits without Alexander Payne. One of them is for I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry. The Adam Sandler and Kevin James play they play straight firemen who get married to have health insurance, I think, if I'm remembering the plot of that movie correctly. It's not good, but it was a big hit. I mentioned they did rewrites on Jurassic Park 3, and Jim Taylor wrote a movie that I just watched because I'm on an Ethan Hawke kick called Juliet Naked, which is about an American rock star who begins a correspondence with a American writer whose husband is a rock star's biggest fan, and then there's like a long distance romance develops. Rose Byrne plays the main character, and Chris O'Dowd plays her husband. So good cast, good movie. Feels like a throwback romantic comedy, marriage drama type movie. They don't make much anymore. I have all the time in the world for Rose Byrne, though. I find her delightful and just a very compelling actress. That's a good movie to check out if you're looking for more Jim Taylor writing stuff. I don't know why you would be after listening to this podcast, but it's not all bad. What else? All right, let's talk about some of the actors. We talked about Damon's stupid ass comments, his Crypto.com commercial, and the fact that he said the F slur up until very recently. Now let's talk about the movies. He made another huge bomb in 2017 called Suburbicon.
Okay.
Do you remember that movie?
No.
I'm trying to remember. Is that the George Clooney directed one? Yeah, George Clooney directed Suburbicon. Man, Clooney cannot catch a break as a director. All his movies fucking flop. And then he's done a lot of cameos, but not a ton of starring roles. He did cameos in Insane, the Steven Soderbergh shot on an iPhone in an Insane Asylum movie. Deadpool 2, he had a quick cameo in. Ocean's 8, he revived his Linus character from the Ocean's movies. The Jay and Silent Bob reboot, less said about that, the better. And a movie we both enjoyed quite a bit, No Sudden Move. I don't know if he'd call it a cameo. He's in one scene, but it's a big one.
It's a big scene, and it's good. He was great in that.
He's good in it. Yeah, he was really good in it. And then he was in Ford versus Ferrari in 2019, which I enjoyed, and it was quite a big hit as well. But that's kind of Christian Bale's movie, I think.
Okay.
And in 2021, he did Stillwater, which I have not seen, and The Last Duel, which we will be covering.
Yeah, so Stillwater, I didn't think I could take what I read about he was going to do in that movie. He pulls it off. It's really good.
I like Tom McCarthy, so I do have a lot of goodwill going into that movie. He's the director of Spotlight and other movies.
And he's good in The Last Duel, too. I didn't finish The Last Duel, but he's compelling in it. But I really shouldn't comment until I watch the whole movie. And we'll have plenty of chance to do that.
It's on the schedule for November as of right now. We'll be gearing up for that in a few months. But yeah, he's still capable of putting in good performances. Clearly, this one felt like a choice to be bad.
Yeah.
And he's got Oppenheimer, the Christopher Nolan World War II movie coming up. I think he might be the lead in that or one of the lead roles. And then he's doing an untitled Nike film he's making with Ben Affleck. I think they're writing it together and Affleck might be directing it. And Damon's going to star in it. I don't know what about Nike, but about Nike.
Interesting.
Let's talk about Wiig, because she also had a rough 2017. She was in Mother, one of the most hated movies by audiences of all time. It's got an F cinema score.
Wow.
Which is very rare.
I might have to watch it.
Well, good news, buddy. You're going to have to.
Oh, shit. I do have to watch it. Breaking news. Yeah. I'm going to watch Mother. I'm stealing myself for that.
But yeah, that's the Aronofsky movie. Interesting to have Wiig in that because she's mostly known for comedic roles. She has branched out, obviously, in the past few years. She's had steady work, though. She was in Where'd You Go, Bernadette, which I have not seen. Wonder Woman 1984, which I did not like. And Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar, which I'm quite fond of. Did you watch that?
I have not gotten to that yet, but you told me it was worth watching.
Her character is named Sharon Gordon Fisherman. It's worth it for that. She also came back as Vicky St. Elmo for the MacGruber series, which we both liked.
Yes.
And she's going to be in an upcoming miniseries called Mrs. American Pie.
Interesting.
Sadly, she was in the Gal Gadot Imagine video that popped up on Twitter at the beginning of COVID.
Yeah.
Maybe the most embarrassing credit on her resume. Hong Chau, she hadn't done a ton of movie work before this, but she was in Inherent Vice. I think we'll be covering that too. Jeez.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone involved in this movie's had a string of bad luck. And then she was also, like you mentioned, in The Menu, which is coming out, and The Whale, which is that Aronofsky movie that Brendan Fraser gained a bunch of weight for.
Okay.
He's playing the lead role in that. I'm not sure what, I know it's based on a play, but I don't know the play, so I can't say what her role is. But she's had a great run on TV. She was in Big Little Lies, Treme, Homecoming, and Watchmen. Those are some pretty good series. I haven't seen Big Little Lies yet, but I really want to. The other three I've enjoyed.
I didn't remember her in Big Little Lies, but that's definitely worth watching. And once I connected who she was in Watchmen, which I absolutely loved, I was thrilled to find out that was her.
Watching this movie and then Watchmen is wild because her characters are so different, and it really shows her range. Homecoming too, she plays like a very different character. She's like a small role in Homecoming season 1, and then she got bumped up to season 2, which I was happy to see because it follows a different story. So you're not really sure if her character's going to come back, but she does.
This is an interesting story to follow her because, like you said, she was just getting started 5 years ago, and now she's doing more and more good stuff. But she was not a young actress when she got started. This is somebody who's climbing onto this Hollywood train at a later age than a lot of the stars that we meet do. So it's neat to see her still on the rise.
Yeah, it's a bit of a feel-good story, unlike this movie, which was a feel-bad story. I think we've solved the great riddle as to why this movie didn't make a ton of money. There wasn't, like, this movie made more money than Nebraska did. Okay. So it's just the stakes are so much higher when you give somebody $75 million and he hands in this kind of grim, nihilistic movie.
It costs a lot of money to make those little boats. And I mean, it was fun to look at. Those vistas where you're looking out over Leisureland and seeing this amazing Fantasyland community, it was neat to see, but was it worth it? No, probably not.
No, and then the movie got poor reviews. It opened, it was just a murderer's row of movies that came out right around that time. You had The Last Jedi in its second week, Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, like we mentioned, Pitch Perfect 3, Greatest Showman. These are all movies that did well, had legs, were going for, but you had every age group represented in those demographics. It was a tall mountain to climb, and I'm not shocked it failed to live up, especially because with a C cinema score, think of a C cinema score as like getting an F- on your project at school, because audiences are very generous in those things typically.
Yeah.
Like a movie can have a 10% on Rotten Tomatoes and it'll still probably have a B+ cinema score because just general audiences are less harsh critics.
Yeah.
So to get a C on your cinema score, it means, they hated it. They probably told everyone that they know they hated it, and not a big mystery as to where it went wrong here.
And it's funny timing, as you say, with the other movies that were out. If you were worried about getting stomped by the juggernauts like The Last Jedi opening above you, The Greatest Showman was one of those sneaky movies that built momentum in the theaters. So like you had a sneaky juggernaut that opened below you and was about to trample over you as it grew week after week.
Not to mention The Greatest Showman, a big hit with older audiences, which is undoubtedly Alexander Payne's key demographic.
Yeah.
So you got this shit movie that's getting terrible word of mouth and bad reviews, or you've got Hugh Jackman singing songs and just being a goofball like he is, being The Greatest Showman. Which one are you going to go see when you're 58 years old and you got to go have dinner at 4 p.m.? Got to catch a movie in the middle of the day. Now I'm just being mean to old people. It was uncalled for.
Don't make me defend 4:30 p.m. dinner. I'm about to sign off this podcast and go heat up some mac and cheese.
All right. So next week, kind of an exciting one. We probably should have flip-flopped the schedule to coincide better with the release of Thor: Love and Thunder. But we're getting in the Hemsworth business for our first time. No, second time. We did Ghostbusters. That's the only movie we've done with him in it.
Probably
not. We did Cabin in the Woods. Look it up, episode 37.
But yeah, we're doing Bad Times at the El Royale, a neo-noir from, what was that, 2018? 2018, yeah. What a fucking cast in this movie.
Yeah.
John Hamm, Jeff Bridges, Cynthia Erivo, Dakota Johnson, Chris Hemsworth, Nick Offerman, Shea Wiggum. I love Shea Wiggum. I'll watch Shea Wiggum do anything. Just a great cast. A director I have all the time in the world for, with Drew Goddard. We've talked about him before because he was the writer of Cabin in the Woods.
Hey, there's that movie again, episode 37.
I'm excited to go back. I watched this movie. I did not make it to the theater, but I watched it the second it hit VOD, and I really enjoyed it. I haven't watched it since, though, so I'm excited to revisit. It's right up my alley.
I enjoyed it, but I'm also have some trepidation going to rewatch it because I remember it being harrowing and a lot to swallow. swallow. So we'll see how I feel about it on this revisit.
Well, in 4 short years, Ian, the world's become more harrowing and harder to swallow. So maybe the movie will seem lighthearted in comparison.
You're right. It probably will.
Oh, I'm excited to watch this. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe. That's 3 things. You don't have to do all 3. If you do 2 of 3, we'll be happy.
Yeah.
1 of 3 will still thank you.
Great.
3 of 3 will be thrilled.
Many as you can.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Give us a rating in your podcast app. We hope for 5 stars. Write us a review if you really like the show. Subscribe to the show so you don't miss new episodes. Follow us on Twitter at BlastZonePod. We're always giving previews of the next episodes and tweeting out movie-related dumbness.
Joking around. You know how it is.
We have fun on the Twitter. You can email us, blastzonepod@gmail.com. People don't email us that much. We get DMs on Twitter. We don't get a lot of emails.
Whatever works. DMs are open.
Either way.
Slide in there.
I guess that's it. We'll see you next time in the Blast Zone.
See you next time in the Blast Zone.